Well, hello everyone. I wish I could be there with you in person today at the start of this Peace and Justice Forum. I hope that everyone had a wonderful early morning session. And what I'm going to try to attempt to do by way of video is to share with you some of my thoughts and ideas on the panel that I was going to host this afternoon with my colleague on what can the modern Occupy movement learn from abolitionists. So let me just make perhaps a few points and then we'll continue from there, and hopefully you could have an interesting conversation. The first point that I would make is that when you look at the abolitionists of the 19th century, certain characteristics that made that movement successful, one of them, perhaps the most important one, was a consistency and a determination and an understanding that they were involved in a long, protracted struggle. So if you think about the fact that the American Anti-Slavery Society was founded in the 1830s, and they worked for 3 decades until the slavery was abolished in 1865. And I think that's important for the young students involved in the Occupy movement to understand that their goals of confronting and eradicating inequality in American society isn't going to be accomplished overnight. And abolitionists who thought that ending slavery was going to be easy were often disappointed, that this was often a generational struggle going on and on and on. That's not to dishearten you. I know the message of this morning was that change is possible and that change can be brought about, and that's certainly true. But if we learn from the abolitionists, that it takes time. And I think given the widening gaps of inequality that are occurring now, that the task before us is as monumental as ending slavery in the 19th century. The second point that I would make is that the abolitionists had certain organizational strengths that accounted for their viability and their ultimate success. One, they did have leadership. It was elected leadership in a democratic process. That they had structure. There was a newspaper, several newspapers in fact, but the leading one was a newspaper called The Liberator. And through that media, the abolitionists were able to get their message out and to share ideas with each other. The structure of the American Anti-Slavery Society allowed for them to have meetings and conventions all over the country and in fact all over the world. And I think that is something that the Occupy movement can certainly learn from, that they would benefit from some collaboration and cooperation, not just in New York City, that group there in Lower Manhattan, but to have some national structure. And that means utilizing some democratic mechanisms among progressive people. The third point that I would make is there was a lot of dissension and conflict among the abolitionists themselves. They were not, as many people believe, one harmonious group of people. As a matter of fact, at one convention, international convention of abolitionists, William Lloyd Garrison and Lucretia Mott and several other American abolitionists went all the way to Great Britain to attend an international summit of abolitionists in London. And they were shocked when they got to the meeting hall where the meeting was taking place, that they were told that women could not participate in the deliberations. And William Lloyd Garrison and Lucretia Mott in particular were offended by the fact that they came on a steamboat all the way from the United States and were told that women could not participate. So they had gender issues within their own organization to contend with. There were racial issues among abolitionists, right? So these are people committed to the ending of slavery, but many of them had different views. Many of them harbored many racist attitudes themselves. Many of them were for the abolition of slavery, but not for the equality of black and white people, which again, today we tend to equate equality with ending slavery, but many people believed, I want to end slavery, but then I want those people sent back to Africa or someplace else. I don't believe in the equality of black and white people. Power sharing within the organization. When William Lloyd Garrison discovered Frederick Douglass in Massachusetts, originally the American Anti-Slavery Society was an organization for the liberation of African Americans as slaves, but was very much top-heavy and completely run in those early years by white abolitionists. And people like Frederick Douglass had to kind of fight, and became a rivalry and a tension between Garrison and Frederick Douglass, even an organization committed to ending slavery. So how might that relate to the Occupy movement, which even in name you might want to rethink? I think something that emphasizes more the 99%, which makes it more of an ideological movement as opposed to about a particular place, occupying a particular space, right? But even within that, how would the examples of the abolitionists be relevant to the Occupy movement? As I said, many abolitionists had racial issues of their own, of how to deal with black people and how their views about slavery. I think within the Occupy movement, you have to question and think about, how do members of the Occupy movement, particularly college students, young people, people of privileged or affluent backgrounds relative to the lowest rungs of society, how do they feel about working class people, about unemployed people, about people who may not have a college education, being active or involved in their organization? Is it an organization of people to help the underprivileged, but we don't really like to associate with these people or want these people, in our midst, in our meetings, interacting with us, sharing their views, voicing their opinions? And so I think, that's something that the abolitionists struggle with greatly, and had to resolve in different ways. The next point that I would make, if I were there with you, is tactic and strategy. The abolitionists were committed to nonviolence. People like Henry David Thoreau were the fathers of the concept of civil disobedience. It was Thoreau's essay on the duty of civil disobedience that became the basis of how they would bring about an end to slavery nonviolently. So the fact that slavery ended through a bloody civil war was not their intention. They did not believe, most of them, except for people like John Brown and others, in going out killing slave masters or blowing up things, but they were committed to a tactic of nonviolence, which meant engagement, that you have to go out and try to persuade, the power of persuasion, the power of argument, knowledge and information, to persuade the majority of people of the error of their ways and the solutions that are available to them. So you can't just talk to like-minded people, people who agree with us, but you have to go out and engage people who differ from your views. And that's what the abolitionists tried to do. That meant that's why they had to hone their skills. Most people did not hear speeches live. Either it was obviously no television, no radio, and so they would read them in the newspaper. So this is the age of great oratory and the age of kind of persuasive essays, writing, publishing, speaking, and today with modern media is something that the abolitionists use very effectively. They struggled over, in terms of tactics, whether to get involved in the political process. Through most of that period from 1830 to 1865, they saw the major two political parties, the Democratic Party and the Whig Party, as they were called at that time, as both being equally corrupt and both being pro-slavery parties. William Lloyd Garrison believed that the Constitution of the United States itself was a pro-slavery document, which it was. And so therefore he felt that you cannot work within a legal system that justifies and institutionalizes the institution of slavery. And so therefore they should not have parties. They did not believe really in voting for Democrats or Whigs. There was a split of those who felt that you have to get involved in the political process, and so they started their own party called the Liberty Party, which was a single issue party, single issue being the abolition of slavery. And they ran candidates nationally, never got anyone elected, and never got much national support, which was very disheartening and very discouraging. Eventually the Liberty Party would dissolve and become a part of the newly created Republican Party in the 1850s. But many of them became despondent. Speaking is not bringing about significant change. Protesting, voting, none of this works, right? And I kind of caution the students involved in the Occupy movement that when they try these various tactics, not to be surprised if nothing changes immediately. But they remained with it and eventually decided to become a part of an imperfect, deeply flawed party called the Republican Party, and came to back a candidate like Abraham Lincoln, who in their minds was acceptable but not preferable. He was their third choice compared to people like William Seward and Salmon P. Chase, two people who were outspoken abolitionists, and these are the kind of people they would like to have, but the best kind of candidate they could find was a person like Lincoln, who they thought was minimally tolerable, acceptable, extremely frustrating to abolitionists, and that he wouldn't move quickly enough or fast enough. And just in the fact that it took him 2 years after the Civil War begins to even issue the Emancipation Proclamation, and that was a very limited document. And so I think that's a good lesson to us, that we may not find perfect candidates who are right on all the issues and are willing to go as far as we think they need to go. And so we have to nurture the Lincolns among us and push them and prod them to reach the better angels of themselves, as they would say, and to be confident, optimistic in that, just as you see the growth, development, the evolution of Abraham Lincoln, we have to take some of these moderate candidates that we have and put steel in their spines and put fire in their bellies, and to nurture them perhaps to become more progressive on the economic issues that we care about. Well, these are just some ideas that I would have shared with you if I were there. Hopefully this works via YouTube in the room that you're there. And I'm sure that my colleague Ronit Shimtov will take it from here. Even if I were there, once I concluded, I probably wouldn't have gotten another word in edgewise. So I'll just turn it over to Ronit and to Kiki Anastasakis, and I hope to see you at other gatherings and other rallies. Thank you, take care, and be well.